Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher from We Are Film, and today I want to do a little video about my narrative template, project template folder file structure. So that was a lot of words, but this is only what I use for narrative films or short films. So this is not the same one that I use for commercials or weddings or things like that. Those are obviously very different, usually built out a little bit differently. They're not super far off, but usually there's a little less emphasis on some of the more intricate things like color and VFX, which we'll talk about. But yeah, so this is a file structure that I've been using for a while now, and I've modified it and I've done some things over the years, especially once I've tried new stuff and I've figured out what really works for my workflow. And of course, this is totally my workflow. You can change and adjust things if you'd like, but this is what I've been using, and it seems to be working pretty well. So I keep this folder in sort of the main, I have a folder just for narrative projects, and I keep it with, usually the month and the day, because usually it's adjusted by year and then the project name. You could, of course, do like year, month, date, year, month, day, and then project template. So I just keep this so I can always duplicate, and that's totally up to you. It could be just the project name. I like adding the date because it's kind of easier to organize things by year. But yeah, so let's jump in. So the first folder I have here is production. And this contains two folders, a documents folder and a behind the scenes folder. And you could add more to this folder. I do a lot of the production on Google Drive. So a lot of like the script and the shot list and all those kind of things are on Google Drive. But if for some reason you need to have them locally, and sometimes I do, you'll want to download those and put those here. And same with the behind the scenes. We do a lot of behind the scenes shoots, and it's good to get some good behind the scenes and have a place where you can put those. So that's production. It's kind of the most boring folder. The next one is media, which is probably the most important folder. And this has two subfolders. Well, a little bit of a ladder here. So the first one is the raw media folder, and you could always add other folders if you needed to. So if you had specific needs for other types of media, in our case, and the reason why I do this is I really like to dump all media in one singular place. So audio and video. I don't like to have them separated. I know a lot of people will import like audio separately to an audio folder or things like that. I do that with photo, which we'll get to later, but for me, dumping video and audio in the same place, and I'll explain why. So inside that raw media folder, I have usually this, which is set up by day, so day 01 in this case, and then year, month, and day. This, you don't have to have the year, month, and day. The month and day can be really, really nice. So I have it set up this way in case there was something that spanned over multiple years. In my case, I actually probably can get rid of the year because typically everything I'm shooting is, it might have different months and days. So it's just kind of nice to know when that was shot without having to put in like metadata or something. So I have day one, and so you can have all your days listed out and then month and day. And I just offload everything. So however many cards and however many, whether it's the audio and video, it's all in one place. This way, you know exactly what was shot on what day. So if you were to hand this off to a different editor or you were trying to, ship it out in some way, shape, or form, you know that everything is contained within this raw media folder. And you're not like, oh, well, my audio's somewhere else. I need to send you this other folder. I think it's just kind of easy and seems to work the best for me. And you don't have to, it's just no relinking really later. And then, of course, you add more days as you keep going. But you could customize this if you wanted to. So you could add different subfolders if you needed. But for me, just the raw media is really the easiest, and then just going day by day inside. So graphics is pretty simple. The first one is a slate. So this is if there's like a project slate that gets created. So if I have a template in DaVinci Resolve to create a slate, but this is if I got sent a project slate. So, just information that you have to have, that would be a graphic template. Or if you're sending it to other editors, like, hey, I want you to always put this slate in front of every piece, you can put it there. Project files, this could be like AE files, or Fusion, I think, has their own files as well. So, any type of like project file, or if you download a template, maybe you could put it here. And that kind of cross over into elements. So elements, right now I have font, really is the only one. But in this elements folder, you could have others, and it could be things like, if you downloaded assets or something like that, or maybe if you had someone send you certain assets, you could put them in this folder. So mainly it's graphic dependent. So if they send you a photo, you should probably put that in a different folder. But if it's something that is like, maybe an Illustrator file or whatever, you could put those in Elements, which for narrative, this is not usually common, but it could be titles or things like that. Usually it's titles. And then of course, renders. So this is if I'm the one rendering out the graphics, or if someone's sending me maybe a final title sequence or something like that, I could always put that in the renders folder. There's definitely some work I could do with this, probably, especially for things like titles. It would be good to probably add like a titles folder, like a send and return. But again, I don't do a ton of this kind of stuff, so just having these sort of basics is usually more than enough. Next up is audio. This is probably the most intense, and this has multiple folders, which, I'll close these down. So special effects, music, and voiceover. And the reason why voiceover is separate is because sometimes there's like an actual voiceover, or it could be more like ADR, which I think is fairly different from like a special effects. So in the special effects folder, I have special effects, design, Foley. So those are obviously very different things. And then I have mixdown. So this is kind of an incorrect terminology, but I think it's the easiest to kind of remember. Is the mixdown is what I'm sending out to Post Audio House, which is normally what I'm doing. So this would be like an OMF file or some type of file, AAF, that the audio person is going to work with. And then the return is just what I'm getting back from the audio engineer. So if they send me a final file, or they send me another OMF, or however it may work, this is going to be the return. And then in music, kind of similar, I have temp music. This is where I store all the temp music when I'm editing a short film, just stuff I'm using. And the return would be where I would return, get the score from the composer, whether it's a final file or multiple files. And, I could have different versions inside of that. So I can kind of keep going on from there and break it down. And then voiceover is, again, I have a temp and a final. So this is usually like if I record a temp, or if I have somebody record a temp, and then the final is just, whether it's a recorded file. So inside of that, you could have like a project folder. That's totally up to you. Again, these are all things you can kind of play with. But for me, usually it's just like a temp one, and then there's a final. And this would include ADR. So I would consider that a voiceover because it's not really a sound effect. And obviously it's not music. So easiest place for that. So yeah, that's audio. And then VFX. So the first one is references. So this is if you were to render out reference frames or reference clips. So maybe if you have 10 VFX shots, you render out 10 of them, and all 10 of them have maybe the temp VFX and maybe VFX notes burned in and shot numbers burned in. So this is great for a VFX artist to obviously know what you're trying to do and have those notes, as well as potentially that, like frame number, frame count, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the full res pulls. So this is the pulling the shots in full res. So this might be, whatever your VFX vendor wants. Maybe it's just a ProRes 444 file or whatever it may be. This would be where you'd put those. And then the returns. So when they send you back the finished VFX files, just chuck them in there, and then they're all right in VFX. So what I try to do in particular, and you can kind of see, is that things are a little bit self-contained. So if I have to send out a VFX folder, I can send out everything, the references, the pulls, and the returns. If I were to render the VFX shots and put them in like a renders folder or rendered media, then the problem is now I have these clips in two different places, which can be a little bit tricky. So kind of the same for color. A full render. So this is usually like a ProRes 4444 going out to the colorist. The return. Reference. This is just kind of like an extra reference folder if I have to, maybe it's stills, or maybe it's actual clips or something. That's just a great place to kind of dump some stuff like that. So super simple there. Photo. Not a ton of photo usually in the film, but sometimes you might have, like raw photos that you took that have to go in the film. Like I think about recently Longlegs, they had some like photos, crime scene photos. So that way, if you were like shooting those photos yourself, and stock or other photos. So this could be like if there's a moment where you have to have a photo in the film, this could be where it might go, like a stock photo or something. I don't know where that would show up, but there's always a possibility. And then lastly, project files. This is like if I'm using Capture One or Lightroom, you can put the Lightroom file here. So again, if you were to send this photo folder off to someone, you could say like, hey, the raw photos are in there. Also the Capture One or the Lightroom, file is in there as well. So like everything's kind of self-contained inside of here. So then I leave this bonus folder. This is just XXX, so you can pretty much put whatever you want in here. So this is like if you had a specific need for an extra folder for a project. So maybe there was like something really specific, like a new category that maybe you have to deal with. Like maybe it was, virtual reality or some type of like motion capture, or, something like that. It's just nice having a bonus folder. And obviously, you could have more. Just for me, having one bonus folder that can kind of flex per project can be a little bit handy. Then exports is pretty simple. So I have this set up with dailies. So this is if I was sending this out to another editor, or sometimes for myself. I just like cutting dailies. This could also be proxy files, although I could probably make a proxy folder inside of the media. But you could put those here. Kind of depends on how you're working with your editor. Rough cuts. So this is where obviously any of like rough cut is going to go. Locked picture. So this is like typically what you're probably going to be sending out to those, the colorist or the VFX or, the audio person to like see what it's going to look like, mainly audio for like audio and music. Final masters. So this is where you would put maybe multiple folders underneath like web, maybe you have a DCP, or, whatever other types. So there's probably going to be multiple folders inside of here. And then other. So this could be anything, right? This could be kind of a dumping ground for like stills maybe, or different things like that. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. And of course too, like that also could go for things like graphics and photo. Like you could put stills in the photo if you wanted to, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I like the idea of maybe just sticking them in the other because they're not technically like a photo. And same with graphics. They're not technically a graphic, but this way, if you just needed to kind of dump something elsewhere, that would be a good spot. But yeah, that's pretty much the folder structure that I use. It's fairly simple and it's always a work in progress. I always seem to be adding or removing. So if there's something that you have or any good recommendations, please let me know. I would love to know. I'm always trying to make this better. So especially if anyone's worked on some really big projects and some big films with bigger crews, I'd love to know what some of those look like. So please be sure to comment if you have any ideas or different advice. And anyway, thanks for watching and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.